So on Saturday I got to see two movies that I was excited for, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and The Lost City of Z finally came to one of our theaters in town, so I finally got to see that too. But let's start off with the big movie that most people would be most excited for, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So, I was a big fan of the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Honestly, if I look back at all of the movies that are part of the MCU, I think Guardians of the Galaxy might be my number one. And right behind it would be Captain America Winter Soldier, I believe. Now, I'm not sure if those two would still be in my top two because I haven't seen the list for quite some time, and I haven't rewatched some of these movies, so I haven't gotten a better understanding of whether I like them less now or love them even more than I did before. But anyway, because I had so much love for the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I was really pumped and really excited to see this movie. I definitely loved it. But let's try to get into the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 because you can sum it up in a very simple way, but a very vague and generic way. And I want to try to encompass a little bit more about what this movie's about without spoiling anything because, honestly, it is a little bit harder to do than at least compared to the first Guardians of the Galaxy. So, obviously, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 happens after Guardians of the Galaxy, and now they're a group of pretty much mercenaries. They're sort of guns for hire and doing all these crazy missions. And at the beginning of the film, they're on a mission. On this mission, they're helping out the civilization of gold people known as the Sovereign. They're helping out these gold people by trying to stop an interdimensional monster from eating their batteries. These highly expensive batteries that I guess power the city or something. And what do you know, Rocket steals some of these batteries after the fight, and now the Sovereign are after the Guardians of the Galaxy. And while they're trying to escape from the Sovereign, Peter Quill and the Guardians of the Galaxy discover Ego, the Living Planet, played by Kurt Russell, who happens to be Peter Quill's father in this movie, Star-Lord's father. So now the rest of the movie is Peter Quill finding out his lineage, bonding with his real father, finding out what his real father is all about, while the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy are dealing with some personal stuff and some traumatic stuff from their past. Also throw in Yondu and Nebula and you got some pretty interesting story. And now that plot might be a little too vague and not a lot of meat on it, but honestly I want you to go into the movie not knowing too much because there is some interesting twists in there and there's some interesting storylines that I didn't think would actually be in this movie. Plus the trailer doesn't give away who the true villain of this movie is, so I don't want to give away the true villain of the movie. So let's start off with what I liked about the movie. Well, I pretty much loved most of the movie. I think all the actors and actresses in the film did a good job with the characters, especially all the previous characters from the last film. There might be a few weak performances here and there, but for the most part, it's exactly what you'd expect from these characters. Not to mention, a lot of these characters have a little bit more fleshing out in this movie, and so they're given a little bit more deeper roles, more emotional scenes that I didn't think that some actors could handle, but they did a fine job. Okay, now of course you get more of a relationship between Peter Quill and Gamora, between Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana. And I liked how that relationship was defined in this movie and how Peter Quill explains it. Even Drax has this sort of crazy relationship with the new character Mantis in this movie that's interesting, complex, and twisted as Drax sees it. Rocket is fleshed out a little bit more as we learn why he's a jerk and how he pushes away everything and some of the turmoils of his past. I definitely love the scene where him and Yondu connect and how we realize that Yondu has a pretty similar past to Rocket in a way. Speaking of Yondu, he's given more of a fleshed out character in this movie. He has a character arc. We learn a little bit more about his past, and we learn about the Ravagers and how he's sort of an exile from the rest of the Ravagers. His relationship with Peter Quill and how he's kind of like a father figure to Peter Quill. We learn more about what his mission originally was when he was supposed to pick up Peter Quill. There's a lot more fleshing out, and I have to say Michael Rooker did a really good job. Maybe it's because he was given more character in this movie, but maybe it's just the character alone that made me like him more, but I have to say Michael Rooker did a good job. And of course we delve into the sister relationship of Gamora and Nebula and their past and how Thanos treated Nebula and Gamora and how much of a asshole and a dick he is. I mean, if you think about Nebula's past, it's pretty damn tragic and quite the horror story that, with Thanos. I mean, if you think about it, all the characters in this movie are developed a lot more, fleshed out more, given more to do, and honestly, all their storylines delve into the same theme of family. And while there is a lot of character development, a lot of side stories to pay attention to in this movie, they all revolve around the same theme of family. They all revolve around the plot in a way that is cohesive and done pretty well. The things that I loved about the first one are still things I love about this one. The dialogue, the jokes, the visual effects, and how stylish and colorful and crazy and outlandish it can be. The action is still good, the sci-fi is still fun. Everything from the first one is still kind of in this one as well. Maybe not done to the extent of the first one, but done in a way that is still acceptable and still really damn fun. I also like how Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is kind of like a parody of superhero films, a parody of sci-fi fantasy films. I mean, it's not full-blown parody like some other comic book movies have been in the past, like Deadpool and the Lego Batman movie, and I'm sure there's a few other ones that I just can't think of off the top of my head. I mean, he kind of plays out these dramatic moments, these cliched moments that you'd expect in these type of films, but then at the end we'll have a joke that sort of subverts your expectations of how you feel this film, this moment should be played out, and how it's played out in other films. And so there is definitely some subversion, some parody doing in this film, and you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. I mean, the opening sequence alone and how it subverts your expectations should show you how this is a bit of a parody and how it's going to be doing something like this throughout the movie, where it takes things that you expect to happen and subvert it and do something a little bit different, something a little bit more comical. I mean, the opening sequence is this big fight with this interdimensional monster, but instead we only see probably less than half of the battle because most of it is focused on Baby Groot dancing. Again, you still see the fight, you see how it's played out, but most of it you see Baby Groot dancing, and it's sort of a subversion, sort of a parody, sort of a having fun by doing something different than the cliched. I can see how people are mad and like, hey, I just want to see the fight. I don't want to see Baby Groot dancing and feel like, oh, that's just shoving Baby Groot in our faces. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, that's not really what it's about. It feels different than that. And that's how I feel. But by having that, it is a little hard to still be dramatically deep and just have some sort of seriousness to it. I mean, sometimes movies like that where they try to have some parody, try to have some fun and over-the-topness, while at the same time having some serious moments, can be jarring. There are movies that can combine this sort of over-the-top, fun, humorous, just crazy movie while still having some dramatic and serious tones to it. It's really hard to balance that. Some movies do it excellently. This one does it about above average. Still really good. There are moments where it is jarring, and I feel there are moments where it subverts a little too much by just adding a joke after a dramatic moment. But for the most part, I still really enjoyed it, still cared about the characters, still felt that it was still trying to be serious, still trying to have fun, while at the same time poking fun of itself and not being too serious. I was pretty much amazed throughout the whole movie. There were some really badass moments, especially when that Fleetwood Mac song, that the chain that is used in one of the trailers, when that song actually pops up at the end of the movie, it's done at a really amazing time, and that was just such a badass moment. There's also some moments that I found really funny, really entertaining, like when Baby Groot has to get something for Yondu and Rocket to escape this prison. While at the same time there's moments where it is deep and it is dark, like this mutiny that happens with the Ravagers, the backstory of Nebula, and what happens with Ego and Peter Quill. It has its amazing moments. It has moments where I was in complete awe, While at the same time, I would say that it was more of a mixed feeling throughout the rest of the film. There was nothing about this film that I hated, nothing about it that I disliked, and I really wasn't disappointed at any point of this film. But I can't help but feel that I liked the first Guardians of the Galaxy a little bit more. In fact, I can't help but compare Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, hear me out, because you might think, well, what the hell? I know a lot of people hate Age of Ultron. I'm not one of those people that hate it. I still like it. Definitely not as much as the Avengers, but please hear me out with this comparison. Now, with the first Avengers movie, it was pretty damn groundbreaking when we had all these superheroes all in one movie. It was the combination of all these movies finally meshing together. We finally get to see the dynamics of these superheroes teaming up and battling each other and trying to work together to defeat a terrible enemy. And then we get the sequel. We get Avengers Age of Ultron, which, looking at the elements and the storylines and the meanings and the character development, all in all, this movie should have been better than the Avengers if you just look at those aspects. I mean, the potential alone was pretty damn amazing, but at the same time, it didn't seem to have the spark that the first Avengers movie did. It's one of those things where the character development and the story are far more better, in my opinion, in Age of Ultron. But there's something about the Avengers, it had that spark, it had that likability, where it just, overall experience, ended up still being better than Age of Ultron. And so for me, that's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 has the better story. It has the better character development, the more memorable story. All these character arcs working together into one story is all handled really well. All the elements in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 should be better than Guardians of the Galaxy. And if I looked at just that, yeah, I would say it's a better movie. But at the same time, I have to look at the overall film, and there's things that the first Guardians of the Galaxy, even though the plot was nowhere near as good as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, there's something about these characters coming together for the first time and working together. There's some sort of spark in the first film that the second one just didn't have as much of. And so that's why I compare Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with Age of Ultron. I hope that makes sense to you. With that said, I still like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 more than Age of Ultron, and it's probably, if I were to do a list, it's probably somewhere in the high middles. Like, it's somewhere in the middle, but towards the high part of the middle, if that makes sense. And I will say that even though I liked all these different side stories and they all work together for the plot and the similar theme, I will say that there's almost too many character arcs and almost too many side stories to really feel like they're fully developed. And there are times when these stories are trying to be put into one movie, the editing feels a little choppy on when they go to the next storyline. So there's a little bit of that I can say isn't as good in this movie, but overall, I still really enjoyed this film. I'm giving Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 a solid 4.5 stars. So, did you like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2015, 2016, or 2017. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.